July 15th of 2023. And so, again, of things that, as outsiders, as people that look at this a lot, we saw that and we said, wow, that's going to come up pretty quick. I think as you work through your budget process, and I think many of you maybe are newer members to council. If we're right now, it's February 14th, Valentine's Day. You kind of work your way through that budget process. I think our recommendation to you is really to reach out to the folks at the state. We can help with some of that. We work with the state as well, and kind of start some of those discussions and conversations about how that particular loan is going to fit in with what you're trying to do on the water sewer side in terms of capital projects, and how that fits in with what the state is able to offer you in terms of loan grant package. We know that I think the projects itself came in much over cost last year, and I think that's probably led to some of the delay. You're certainly not alone in that. We're seeing that across the industry. A lot of construction projects, whether it's water or sewer, they're coming in much, much over. It's a challenge right now that you all face as local governments, whether you're a town, a city, or a county. Not an easy solution in the short run, but I think given where you are in Richlands and given the good conversations you apparently had with the state folks going back into last year, would really recommend that you, to the extent you aren't already, kind of re-up those conversations with the folks at the state. Because there are opportunities, given the federal dollars that flow through the state, to have low-interest loans and grants that are going to be better than what you'll be able to find on the current market, whether it be with a bank or somebody else.
Question, Heather, is that Thompson Litton?
Well, we've already paid Thompson Litton to do the engineering. That's that loan that he's talking about.
Yeah. So that is the $1.2 million to Thompson Litton that's coming up.
Yes, that was part of the process. It's like a whole plan. You have to do the engineering before you can do the upgrades. And the 1.2 million, I think is what it was, is the engineering part. So if you send it out for RFP, you would have to have that redone.
And the interest on it is 7%?
That's just recently.
When was that taken out?
Well, it was a long time ago. I mean, that's been 2020.
Is it variable?
Well, whenever they didn't complete the idea was whenever they did the upgrades, that would roll all in together with the upgrades, and it would all get financed.
Okay.
BDH and DEQ, well, not all of it, portions of it.
Of course.
Much lower interest rate, but they won't do that unless we actually do the upgrades.
Interest rates back then was like 3%.
Free, yeah.
I mean, how did you guys get saddled with 7%?
Well, it's variable.
It's recent.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can answer maybe a little bit of that. I think what it looked like is the last update that was done, it's tied to, I mentioned earlier, the interest rates have gone up a bunch in the last year.
So it's variable?
Yeah, it looks like it's adjusting based on, like, when you hear about the Federal Reserve changing their base rate, it looks like this loan is ratcheting up in terms of interest rate when the Federal Reserve is changing their base rate.
Most of the time you have a cap rate,
Yeah.
you know?
Can we refinance such? Is that on the
Yeah,
table?
I mean, I think that it looked to us that it was prepayable anytime with no penalty. I think it was a National Bank loan, if I'm not mistaken there, Heather. We know National Bank very well. They're very active in the region. They've helped the county and worked with the PSA. We did some things there last year. So I think that's certainly worth the discussion.
Okay.
If we had one recommendation on this side, as we talk to you now, it's really engage with the state.
Okay.
And engage, I'd probably start there, and then also engage with the National Bank folks. I'd probably start with the state, though, and see,
Okay.
Kind of where they stand in terms of how they're thinking about funding your project, and getting them involved in some of those discussions, getting their sense of things on timing, to Heather's point, in terms of they've got certain requirements they can't get around because
Of course.
the money comes to them from the federal government, and it always comes with a bunch of boxes you have to check along the way. But I think starting that discussion and helping them make sure they're in the loop on kind of these kind of things is going to be helpful to you.
Awesome.
I mean, most cap rates, they used to do a cap rate like 2%, that it can't go above that. And,
Yeah, and in fairness, Councilman, the rates have changed a lot in the last.
oh yeah, I
12
know that's
months.
why you would have a 2% cap rate.
Yeah.
You know. Was that under John or was that Tim, Heather?
It was in 2020 was when it was originally taken out.
Is that Tim?
I have no idea.
When did John come?
21.
Okay, so it'd been under Tim.
But that's not the point, like, what he's talking about and what you're saying are two different things. So when it was originally taken out, I don't know what the interest rate was then, in 2020. So the idea was to never keep this long. We were gonna do those upgrades, and it was gonna roll into the, state-funded loan, which would have nowhere near 7%. So that's where the disconnect was whenever they didn't complete the upgrades because of the cost. It was never, ever since then, it's fluctuating. When you don't complete the portion, and then if you don't actually do the work, the state won't give you the money.
Okay, I understand that, but I always,
The 2020 doesn't have anything to do with now.
well, I mean, most people would cover theirself. If you take out a loan, you always put a cap rate on it because you don't know the circumstance in the future. And if they'd have put a cap rate on that, that would have probably been 4.5%, 5% at that time instead of 7%. You took it out in 20, it was low, okay? Most banks, and I don't understand why it wasn't done, will give you 1.5% to 2% cap rate, that it can't go above that. And I don't care.
I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
You don't, what I'm telling you is the time came and went, and like nothing was done, so you couldn't finish it out anywhere else. In order to do that, you have to give the bank advance notice if you're gonna refinance.
Oh,
This was probably a 6-month thing that just recently happened, and that's why, because we don't have any steps to take or direction on where that's gonna go, because there's, the only thing that has been done in the upgrades is the engineering piece.
Oh.
So when you don't do that, and you don't actually do any of the upgrades, then the state won't do it. So it didn't go in knowingly at that rate, and it hasn't been that rate always.
Yeah.
Since 2020. It's just recently, because nothing was ever finalized and committed to doing the upgrades. And then if you go back through DEQ and BDH, then you're gonna have different requirements now than you did then.
Well, I understand that, but we're talking about the same thing. When you go to the bank, you always cover yourself, and that would apply now. You make sure you knew interest rates were going to rise. You always cover yourself, no matter the time period you have it. You always put a cap rate on it. Most banks do that, and I can't understand how we got stuck with a 7%.
I do think we should hedge in the future.
Pardon?
I do think we should hedge against that in the future. Like,
Yeah.
I agree the fail safes, but I understand short-term financing is easier to get. So I get it, but something we need to address going forward.
Yeah, and
I'm
I think
with you.
the
More complex.
I'm sorry, yeah, and the other point that maybe I'll make is, again, from this side of the equation, it does look like it's prepayable and it's have no penalty. So I think amongst those conversations that you'd be wanting to have, and I think a number of you being new on council, at least as I understand it, I think those two tracks in terms of talking to the National Bank and seeing what they'd be certainly willing to do. I mean, that's prepayable and not no penalty, et cetera, and kind of working the state in there. And I think part of the concept there in working in the state is at least as we've understood this, and Heather just mentioned this multiple times over, and we saw that in the documentation, is, the idea was to always take out that loan with the state loan. And so to the extent the bank knows some of the information that the state is going to come behind, and maybe there's a pathway to get to that point, it's going to make your conversations with the bank easier, to the extent they can see and understand, okay,
The good thing,
the VRA folks have said, if you do this, that, and the other, the loan and grant will be there behind it. I think that's going to help your conversations with
The good thing
bank folks.
about it, interest rates are supposed to go down in 10 to 11 months, so that's one good thing that they're predicting.
Yeah, hard to know, but
Yeah.
yeah.
We hope. Okay, Kyle, we're ready.
Okay. Page 20, enterprise funds policies. Again, these are things that we'd recommend putting in place and thinking about, similar theme here, thinking about those reserves, sort of making sure you have reserves for rainy days, especially on utilities whereby electric funds, water and sewer, pumps break, lines go down, storms come through. You want to make sure you've got good cash reserves so that to the extent you have to go do some of those emergency repairs, you're not having to go to the bank. You've got the own funds there.
Excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt you. I just want to reiterate to people at home that I don't check my phone when I'm sitting here unless I'm getting multiple messages. Our sound is off again, and people want to hear this.
Frank, how does it look like on your end?
It was probably about 2 or 3, is it recent? Because I got several a while ago.
Yeah,
Right
it's.
before and after I got it.
I just now, I'm going through them just now, but it's within the past
That's been about.
5 minutes. Yeah.
Restart the stream perhaps? Is that something to consider, or
What'd you say?
do we want to restart the stream, or, I mean, I don't know if it's a physical layer or a technical layer. I've already rebooted. Oh, yeah, there's that.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry we can't convey all we would like through YouTube and our various methods, and to the members of the audience and to the council. What does it look like to you, Frank?
Looks like it's working.
Okay, you still getting text?
Yeah, the last one was, I've been getting them for the past hour, but again, I don't check my phone.
I just got,
Um,
that said that they could hear the sound.
Okay.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead, sir. Thank you very much. We're trying to be open to the public.
Understood. Understood entirely. So, on page 21, I think we can kind of really wrap up after this. But in terms of thinking about policies, again, thinking about those capital improvement programs, we saw some of the planning and information that was done, especially on water and sewer, I think, in the last year. It's unclear to us if, sort of that's been followed through. I think there was a rate study on water and sewer and electric, sort of its own thing. And so I think our other takeaway and recommendation would be, especially as you're in this budget process right now, revisiting some of that multi-year planning, whether it's operations, whether it's capital, understanding really not just what does next year's budget look like, but what is a multi-year, and we tend to like to think about like a 5-year time period. What does a 5-year time period look like? You can go longer, but 5 tends to be a good window of time to be thinking and planning for purposes of rates on electric and water and sewer, taking into account certainly the operational side of things. I think globally we see the pressure on the operating costs there. The capital side as well. It seems like as we've evaluated this with as much information as we have, you've got some pressures on the capital side by virtue of some of these projects, and really thinking about during your budget planning process here a multi-year strategy. I think the state will kind of help inform some of that, especially on the water and sewer side. But getting into some of that discipline during the budget time period to think not just about what does next year's budget look like, but what does a 5-year time period look like. And so with that, Mayor, I'll pause. I realize that was probably a lot in a relatively short, hopefully didn't go on too long for you or members of the public, but wanted to give you a summary and synopsis. Again, as the 22 numbers are available, we can update some of these things, but wanted to share that with you all, and we appreciate your time.
Kyle, we thank you very much. Do you have your contact information?
Yeah,
Layla?
by all means. Yeah,
Okay.
Heather has it by all
Thank
means.
you, Heather. If you'll share it with everybody, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Are there any questions for Kyle at this time? Thank you for your explanation, and I will compliment you. Your presentation of this booklet is one of the best I've seen.
Good, thank you.
You get it on a level I can understand. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate
And
the time.
that is not self-deprecating, that's just the truth. Where do you have to go tonight?
Let's see, head back towards Richmond a little bit, but I've got some meetings in the neighborhood into tomorrow, so not too far.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please give our regards to the capital city.
Will do.
You're welcome.
So he keeps explaining, but like the end of the year for 2022 isn't complete.
Yes.
So I would just like to go ahead and see if it's just, as of right now, as soon as we get it, would I be is it you all's wishes for me to share that with him?
My personal opinion is yes. I thought it was clear where we might be going.
I
but
feel like
it's
it'd
a
be
council thing.
difficult to continue without being able to do that.
What kind of expense are we talking about, Heather?
I can't even remember.
We can still, we have
Can we operate within what
Yeah,
we're
we did.
doing?
It was like in April, wasn't it? We were talking about that. Was it April we first met?
I think it was warm when we first met.
I do too. I feel like it was more.
That's true. That's true. In terms of, we can go back and look at what the agreement was, but I think given where you are with the audit and everything,
Okay.
it's not additional expense.
Okay.
I appreciate that, because obviously, when you go over this, everything is a concern to us, especially money, and I really appreciate that. So, I was just Googling your name. Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
may we take a quick recess? But before we do, may I, just to clear up for at home, this was not the annual audit. This was basically just kind of a review, correct? I mean, and basically they said to us, hopefully we will have this book maybe available on the website for everyone to see, but basically, we don't have as much coming in as we have going out, is kind of to summarize. And this was not the annual audit. We don't have the audit back yet, and this gentleman will come back and complete a more updated study when we do have the audit completed.
And this is not the other audit either.
No, this is not a forensic audit. This was
This
from
is the independent audit.
a
that we asked
financial
for.
review. Thank you,
I got
Heather.
a question too. The next time you come back, can we do this in like a workshop instead of in council meeting?
Well, probably what I would prefer, is if when we start which I started working on the calendar and everything today, is when we get into the budget session, and we'll take it the way that, kind of like how he laid it out, the general fund, and then we'll do the water, sewer, electric, that kind of thing. But before we get into the budget, I would prefer his review as well.
Well, if we have a workshop, we can talk about more. I mean, we've got a pretty big agenda and it's hard to put something.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. Okay, yeah.
Instead
Yeah, I
of a
see.
regular meeting at the council
I see
during
what
the
you're
work
saying,
session.
yeah. And that's what I meant like with the extra
Yeah.
meetings, yeah.
That would work.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
that's all I'm asking.
Yeah.
Because it's too hard to put this, because there are a lot of questions, instead of being here all night, that we can't answer. It would be better if we had a workshop to do this.
I think that's a good suggestion. I'm appreciative, because I'm looking, we've other people who would like to speak, so that's a good suggestion, Rick. And if the council is agreeable with that, I think Heather can schedule that for us at an appropriate time.
Yeah.
In conjunction, in tandem with Kyle. Thank you.
Thank
It's a
you.
pleasure. Drive safely. Thank you. We have a 5-minute recess. That's a good suggestion. That's
What's left of it if,
They send us to, they send them to us.
Whatever you don't have, we can take back, and then if y'all want to, we can divvy that across the time or whatever. Oh, yeah, that's fine.
The bubble performance. Sounds interesting.
You don't know what you need.
Oh, okay. Who you going to watch? Oh, okay. Oh, okay. I got you. That'd be nice. Some good food up there too.
That's part of our policy. You go to the car. Now, what was it?
Oh, yeah. Kiss me and okay. Yeah. My son was down there. They stayed in Disney. He's a doctor in Jacksonville, so they just drove up there and they stayed 3 4 weeks. Pardon? Oh yeah, yeah. He's in practice. They've got 50 doctors in his practice. They've got like 7 hospitals. Yeah. Yeah, I love Florida. But it, pardon? Oh yeah. Yeah, down there. Where's he live? Okay, got you. I got my graduate and part of my doctorate at Radford.
He didn't go to school there. He's 4 years older than I am. So when I moved out of the house to go to town, I think he got mad. He moved up there to Radford.
And you went to Radford? Okay, Tech. Okay.
This meeting of the Richlands Town Council will now come back into order. We want to thank Kyle for his presentation. We're moving on. For people who've been waiting patiently, Debbie Milton with Cumberland Plateau, and also we have joining us Reed Moorman. Reed, if I said your name incorrectly, I'm very sorry. This is Reed, and I want to introduce you just a little bit of what I know about Reed, which is about not much. But his wife is Christine, and his wife has a broad introduction to Southwest Virginia through the Clinch River Valley Initiative. And to that end, they have more than a decent understanding and appreciation of our area. And it's pretty deep, and I'm grateful for their participation tonight. They're with, I'm introducing you with Dialogue and Design. It's a firm from Charlottesville, Virginia. They are the ones we've been working with. I didn't know it until recently for our planning grant, which is a $50,000 planning grant, which will hopefully lead to a rehabilitation grant a CBDC, Community Block Development Grant. So without further ado, I will also want to welcome Debbie Milton. Can you see it, everybody? Debbie Milton, who is with Cumberland Plateau. And I know many of you remember Jim Baldwin. Well, she has essentially assumed the role of Jim. Is that correct?
I could never assume those big shoes of his, but.
Well, you have on
yes,
different
yes,
shoes.
Yes.
But they're good shoes. So I talked briefly with Debbie about this planning grant, and she wants to make a presentation tonight. And along with Reed, is Christine able to join us, Reed?
No, I'm afraid she's unable to join us this evening.
Well, that's okay. Thank you both for being very patient. It's the nature of governmental business. Thank you. So Debbie or Reed, feel free.
Well, I'll just give a little background, and then I'll let Reed chime in. He's going to need some dates from you guys. Well, the story goes back in 2019, the town of Richlands approached Cumberland Plateau, wondering about a downtown revitalization grant. Well, DHCD, a lot of times, they recommend you go through the planning grant process. And the whole purpose of that is to prepare you for when you get the opportunity to go in for a grant, that you have all the documentation and everything you need in order to be able to apply for that grant. So in 2019, Connie Allen and I started talking. We did a letter of intent to DHCD. They came back, gave us some things we needed to do. Connie got right on it. She went downtown. She talked to a lot of businesses, took pictures, put it all together. Cumberland Plateau helped with some mapping. So we were doing a lot of that, and then guess what? COVID. So all of the public meetings that we needed to hold and everything was just put on, just stopped. And so the grant process stopped. Well, so in 2020, we decided that, after 2020, we'd pick it back up, probably about 2021. So by that time, it had been so long, they asked that we go in and reapply. Well, they come back with some conditions that we needed to do. And then I was working with Ashley and John, mostly Ashley Harris. So we went back and reviewed some of the things. We actually held public meetings, a couple. I think there were some folks here. Ginger and Lori was here. And we talked about the grant going forward. Well, what we did was we went out with an RFP for a consultant. And the purpose of a consultant is to put together some planning documents. It's a master plan, an economic development plan, and just a plan in general of how to approach the revitalization project. So we did have 3 firms apply, Dialogue and Design, who Reed is with, Hill Studios, and Thrasher. They all applied, and we went through the process of ranking them. I think Adrian Cordell was on that little team of ours, and we chose Dialogue and Design. Well, after that happened, we need to start setting some dates to go with some of the town representatives or whoever would like to be involved and get public input and that sort of thing. And Reed has got some dates in mind. I think his contract was about 6 months. We're a little lagging behind right now. I think we'll have to extend that time frame. So that's where we are right now with the planning process. So does anyone have any questions or anything I can answer about the grant or anything? What we hope to do is get these documents ready. The competitive round for block grant is generally in March or April. We won't be able to make it this year. It'll have to be next year. But by that time, we should be through all the planning process and have those documents. So I'll just turn it over to Reed, and he'll talk a little bit more. Thank you.
Okay. Let's give it 5 minutes. Laura has to step out for an emergency. So I'm sorry, Reed. I would give you a tour of Richlands, but I can't do it. Thank you. I'm sorry.
I'll be glad to answer any questions you might have, anybody. Rita's gonna ask you guys to come up with some dates for public input. I think they're planning some different things. He'll explain to you a little bit about that. And once he does that, then they'll be able to start compiling all that data and that information. He will have people here working in the downtown. And, what they'll try to do is come up with a concept that suits everyone. They'll look at, different options. They'll see what needs to be done. They'll have some recommendations of, after they look at everything, about what they think is feasible. He'll also visit the budget, how much things will cost and what we can do, so.
Laura, hold on. Is your family okay, number one?
Yes,
Okay.
Okay.
Well, I'd actually put the gavel down for 5 minutes, but I'll put this thing back into, we were just having an informal conversation. I don't want you to be lost in part of it. So I always think of family first.
Yes, sir.
Everything good? Okay, I'm sorry you had to run out, and we pray for whatever it is. Okay, so back in session.
Okay.
So-
I'll just turn it over to Reed
Yeah.
and let him talk.
To bring you up to date, Jan asked her if there was something we could do to move it along, and I think Reed will have lots of good suggestions. Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Reed.
Good evening all. Thank you all for making time for me. Mayor Curry, Debbie, members of council. It's good to finally connect with Rick on a person-on-person basis. As Debbie said, the grant process got off to a slow start, but we're ready to rock and roll here. And tonight, I'm going to spend a few minutes and talk through who Dialogue and Design is, who I am, and how we can best serve you all. I'm going to propose a series of steps and key milestones for the process that we're recommending. And we're going to wrap up by asking you all to confirm a couple of dates, or at least connect me with the person who can confirm them for the town. So with that said, I'm going to share my screen here and give you all a view of a few items. Here we have. As Debbie said, Dialogue and Design competed to be awarded the RFP for some economic revitalization work. And this work is primarily focused on streetscape improvements and building facade improvements. That's a broad set of terms, and there's a lot of different little detailed things that can fit in there. On one level, it might be pocket parks. It could be new sidewalks and streetlights. It could also be common investment between the grantors and private business owners for improvements of specific buildings. And the work bound into it from the beginning has a pretty strong bent toward economic fidelity, if you will. So I'm going to share a little bit about our team. And before I jump into that, this is some of the other work we're doing in the region. So not far down the road from you all, Dialogue and Design is involved with the city of St. Paul, and we're working on the Three Rivers Destination Center. This is a pretty fantastic partnership where we work with Downstream Strategies, who is also our teammate on this project for the town of Richlands. But we're also working with Appalachian Voices and Russell County and the Heart of Appalachia, the local tourism authority, to help develop new headquarters for their business, but also master plan polluted site and reoccupy it in a meaningful way that will hopefully generate jobs for the community and help to support the local ecology by showcasing the river itself. And I'm going to move through these kind of quick, but if you all have questions, we can certainly go back more to individual projects near the end. Also, not far down the road from you all in Troutdale, Dialogue and Design was the prime contract holder for some master planning, illustration, and facilitation work at the Blue Ridge Discovery Center. We did some preliminary architectural assessment, took a lot of public input from their stakeholders and various members of their community and put together a phased master plan that can help them grow into new kind of areas of professional work. We also prepared these drawings as a, excuse me, as a marketing strategy for them. So dialogue and design is using not only our facilitation skill, but also my background as an architect and designer and illustrator to help explain some of the issues we're encountering to the community, even after dialogue and design is no longer working. And listed a couple of different places. This is a 20-acre development in Crozet, Virginia, up here near Charlottesville, which is where I'm based. And this was a developer-driven project. They hired dialogue and design because their interest was in engaging the community in meaningful development strategies. And so we initially helped them identify 3 possible avenues for development of a 20-acre post-industrial parcel. We partnered with the county and eventually held multiple public meetings with over 150 participants in each one that provided recommendations that both the county and the developer used to advance the zoning application and rezoning application for this project. So real quickly, that gives you a pretty fair idea of what we do at Dialogue and Design. We like to pull people together in big groups. We like to ask a lot of questions, and we like to kind of identify these certain key nuggets that show up over and over again. We also like to make sure we get arguments out in the open, and we work for the consensus-based solution when there is disagreement. And often, this work results in design outcomes, whether it's a building or master plan. This is kind of our bailiwick. We like to show you all what we do, and we like it when you all can share and be excited about the stuff that you're involved with. So in terms of the project that Debbie introduced and that Rob mentioned, dialogue and design is really going to be the middle figure here in the workflow that's going to go back and forth. On our side, we've hired Downstream Strategies out of West Virginia, and they are going to support the economic analysis of the project. They are going to help us create potential for funding paths for fulfilling the design we come up with. And they're also going to do some assessments on the front end, help us figure out what the low-hanging fruit is. We also have on our team Revive Strategies, and that's in case the public meetings are larger than we can handle in-house. Revive Strategies is serving as extra facilitation help, especially when we get large groups of citizenry. But Downstream Strategies, Revive Strategies, communicates through dialogue and design to the town of Richlands. And right now, Mayor Curry is our point of contact, but we'll address the question of whether he is the best person to do that, or if another member of council, another member of the community might serve that position. And that communication that we have between dialogue and design in the town is going to be monitored and overseen by the group. She is the grand administrator, and she is going to making sure that we keep all of our I's dotted and T's crossed. And so as we move forward, we are going to create a planning team that's made up of a member of Dialogue and Design, a member of the Cumberland Plateau Planning Commission, that's Debbie, and a member of the town of Richlands. And this group is going to be making the core decisions about how we shape our process and how we respond to certain issues that come up in the public meetings we're proposing. So the task at hand, this was a map we provided during our RFP response. Part of this map was provided to us as part of the RFP, and we augmented it a little bit to clarify some points in our response. But we've been asked to provide architectural assessment, and with our partner Downstream Strategies, economic assessment of 2 potential areas in Richlands. In this map, I'm calling them the East End and the West End. And within each of those, we are going to look at streetscape improvements, facade improvements, how to partner with local private landowners, and really how to get the most bang for our buck here. Of course, there's discussion about which improvements are most relevant, whether they're streetscapes or private building owners. There could be a number of different, things proposed here. But what we want to identify is that these proposals all occur within the context of Richlands. There's some key things going on about how the streets move and work around you. And we're going to be there on site to help get the best handle on the situation we can. To do this, we're proposing a process that has 3 public meetings and 4 planning team meetings. This is just the beginning of what we propose. There's certainly some flexibility in the planning team meetings. But the public meetings work on a cycle where we kind of open ourselves up. We ask, again, a lot of questions. And we try and get as much input as we can. And then we refine that input and feed it back in to the next public meeting, revise it again based on what we hear, and feed it back in over and over until we get to the final report. So in front of you, you can see this process in just kind of rough diagrammatic form. And what it identifies is 4 planning team meetings with dates and times, and 3 public meetings with dates and times. If I walk through them real quick, the planning team meeting next we would hold on March 14th. We can discuss this. But that is really in preparation for what we are proposing as the first big public meeting. That's March 30th. We would be on site with our facilitation team, with our economic analysis team. We would tour town, and we would open the meeting up to all the members of Richlands who are interested in joining us. In conjunction with this meeting, we are also going to make an online survey available to citizens. We are going to ask that hard copies be printed and left at the local library or at the local town hall, so members of the community without internet can access the survey. And we're going to gather as much information as we can. So during that first meeting, we're going to identify what we see are some of the issues and present these different areas of focus. We're going to put different ideas about improvements out there, and we're going to suggest some different avenues for funding improvements. And